This is Hannah and Kaylin, back again with Double Talk. I'm Hannah.
And I'm Kaylin.
Amanda Riley is a wife, a mother, a Christian woman, and a cancer patient who lives her life to the fullest. For almost a decade, Amanda documented the ups and downs of treatment for her readers and her community, bravely sharing her most vulnerable moments. But there's a catch. Amanda's cancer battle is entirely fabricated. In the Lionsgate podcast Scamanda, host and producer Charlie Webster peels apart the fascinating true story layer by layer, taking listeners on the same ride Amanda's family and friends took as they realized the Amanda they thought they knew had been keeping a sinister secret. We caught up with Charlie just before the show's final episode premiered, so we try to keep spoilers at bay but proceed with caution, to discuss Charlie's method of juggling the complex story and try and get inside Amanda's head. Listen in.
I think a good place to start in kind of unfolding the story a little bit here is, can you tell us how you became connected with Nancy, who became obviously a really important part of this project?
Nancy is somebody who, she's worked in true crime for a long time. Behind the scenes as somebody that, finds a story and then kind of goes after it. She basically got an anonymous source in her inbox that said, look, I think this woman is faking something and do you want to look into it? So she started looking into it amongst, many other things. And this is like years ago now. And this was around 2015, and she starts looking into it and then gets slightly, I always use this word, she won't mind. She becomes slightly obsessed with it because she started to read Amanda's blog posts, and she was saying she'd got cancer. They were so raw and so intimate, and there's pictures, and you are so engaged with them. When you read them, you're like, oh my gosh, this poor woman, and the humanity side of you. And anyway, Nancy starts to look into them, gets slightly obsessed with it, and then realizes there's a few things that don't add up. So then it becomes quite a personal thing, because Amanda finds out Nancy's looking into her and then accuses her of basically, it's like a crazy soap opera, accuses her of working with the ex-wife, which I'll explain in a minute, to basically cause problems for her and being vindictive. Then now I come in. So then it became very personal for Nancy. She wasn't doing it as a story. She was basically trying to make sure that this woman was stopped. So she was telling me about it. And then I started to look into it because I wanted to be kind of independent in terms of the story. So I was like, okay, let me look at everything that you've got and let me go away and see if I can make, what I think is this as a story and how I could kind of create something. And then I became totally captivated with it. And I actually went up to San Jose. I don't want to spoil it, but I went to Amanda's sentencing. I met Amanda. I met a lot of people who are involved in her community, and then started to basically craft a story and make a podcast. And then I put Nancy in as a character in a way, like as a protagonist character that was going after Amanda, and Amanda was accusing her of being the enemy. And then you've got these two women, both very clever in their own ways. And then it's kind of who comes to fruition in the end.
I think what's most captivating, at least at the beginning, about the story is that we've all seen this kind of community involvement with somebody's story. We've seen communities rally together who are really touched by a member of the community who keeps a smile on their face no matter what they're going through. And I think that's probably what's part of the big rabbit hole for you and Nancy and for everyone at the beginning. What did you find to be sort of what I would describe as the cracks in Amanda's story? Like, wait a minute, that first moment that something's not right?
I think you make so many good points, because I think this can happen in any community, and I don't know what's going on at the moment, but this seems to be a bit of a thing. But I do know that the podcast is setting a precedent, and that people are listening to it in law enforcement and different states to learn how to stop these people doing these things. I think, you mentioned the cracks. So something like this it happens over time, right? So it's little bit by little bit. And you said, you know, you would never ask somebody, if I said to you, I've got this thing, I've got cancer, or, you know, can you help me? You're not going to go, have you really? It's something that is awful. I think it's touched all of our lives in some way or another, whether it's us personally or family members or friends or our own community. So firstly, using something like that, you're not going to necessarily suspect something or look into somebody, because I do think we have to be careful, because we should still believe in kindness and good, rather than being suspicious of every single person. In terms of the cracks, Amanda, what makes this story unique is Amanda was blogging about this. So she'd post a blog 2 or 3 times a week since 2012. And that was the start of, I suppose, like early day influence, right? Because there was no TikTok, Instagram wasn't really a thing, but blogging was a thing. And you automatically feel the credibility, and it's a way to connect with people. And she was so detailed. So there weren't obvious cracks. And she did this for years and years and years. So there wasn't really anything obvious until you really started to scrutinize it. So that logo in the background from that hospital didn't match where she said she was. Or that gown, a hospital gown, is not the color of where she says she is. So it's such minutiae that you have to really be detailed to go into it. And then, well, what does that prove? Because you can't put somebody behind bars for lying, because lying is not technically illegal. So, and then there's HIPAA laws. So, you know, we're all protected by our medical confidentiality, right? So you can't just phone up and go, you know, what's Charlie got wrong with her? So that was protected as well. So not even the police can do that. So even when the police started to look into it, they weren't quite sure. And then how do you even go about something like this? Because this isn't something that normally happens. It's like, how do you even, I think the police know how to go after, it's awful, but, you know, murder, burglary, all these different things that sadly are common cause. But something like this is, you know, where's the rule book of somebody faking cancer? So in the end, it was one tiny little thing that basically outed her, and a very clever detective who managed to do that. But even when there was that crack, which I'll let people listen to the podcast, because otherwise I will totally spoil it. Even then, the police couldn't do anything. So then they had to get the IRS involved, because you're like, well, criminally, what has she done wrong? Okay, she's lying about having cancer. It's not really criminal. So then it had to go down to the money that she was getting through her websites, which were wire fraud. So all the people that gave cash, in-kind services, which a lot of people did, cooked meals, looked after their children, you know, kind of, she was on these subscription things for nutritional shakes, flights for points. Somebody even donated their plasma. None of that counted, because technically you couldn't prove that. So it's so complex, which is what I think is so fascinating, because I think we have a perception of like good and bad. These stories just merge it, because she did inspire people, and she did send care packages to people that had cancer. But at the same time, she was saying to them, oh, I know how you feel, but I'm here to help you. But then she did. And so it's kind of this like master manipulation, really.
I really liked how the first couple episodes of the podcast like really painted this portrait of this woman that you wouldn't have second guessed, and then kind of like the facade gets broken down for the listener in the same way that the people in her actual life, the facade was pulled down. What are your thoughts as far as when was the right time to kind of start peeling that away for the listeners, where it's like, this is the person that you thought she was, and now wait a minute, like, I think the way that it was done was so perfect, and I just want to know your thoughts on how to craft that.
Firstly, thank you, because that is exactly what I was trying to achieve. So I appreciate you a lot because, there was many ways that I could have gone about this. And I really sat there and I was like, what is so fascinating about it? What am I so compelled to? Because I went along that journey, because when I started to look into Amanda and this story, I didn't really know what was true. Genuinely, she hadn't had her consequences. I'm trying not to spoil it. So I wasn't sure myself. And then hearing people's stories, people believed her right until the very last second. And I know people that still aren't quite sure, right? And I was like, can I, because I had the blog posts, right? So they've all been taken down on the internet, but I have all of the blog posts. So can I bring you as a listener close to her? Can I get you into her psyche? Can I help you follow her journey and how she did this? Can I actually get you to feel connected to her? So that's why I did it like that. I could have just gone, this is what happened to this woman, and I'm going to report and tell you why, and through lots of different people I've interviewed. I decided to try and craft it almost like a fiction story where, for those that haven't listened to it, the blog post, I got an actress to read the blog post, and I do have recordings of actual Amanda. So I matched them to try and get this person to sound like them with the exact tone and the way that Amanda would talk, because I have videos of her speaking at church. I have her voice notes. So I wanted to try and bring you as close to the character of Amanda as possible and unravel it from there. So if you notice, you don't actually know until the last episode, which isn't, as we record, isn't currently out. You don't actually know what she ends up being done for or what she's actually done. Because a few people were like, that I spoke to, were like, oh no, but she did have cancer. It's just that she didn't pay her taxes on the funds. And I'm like, no. And then other people are like, oh no, I think she did. And then she just went in remission and then it carried on. And then you're like, well, what about Nancy, who's the person that went after Amanda? Do you like Nancy? Are you on her side? Is Nancy right? And so I think these two women, I think it's, what Amanda's done is again, it's probably quite obvious what the ending is now, but what she's done and the impact she's had on people is really awful. Like, she's caused a lot of trauma and hurt a lot of people. Never mind the money. It's like the violation of trust and I suppose the mental health problems that it's caused when somebody hurts you like that and takes advantage of you. But it's a fascinating story into somebody that it is a master in terms of psychology, really, and human behavior. And I think that's what's so fascinating. And I think it gives you all the signs of what coercive control is, what narcissism is, what manipulation is, how these people infiltrate a community and a society, and what they utilize to try and prey on people. And that's why I crafted it like I did. So you were never quite sure until the very end, because that's what people felt like. So I wanted you. That's why I'm like, thank you, because you're exactly right. A few people are like, oh, it's a bit long. She could have wrapped this up in. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not the point. I'm not giving you a news report. I'm taking you on the journey of the story.
There's some things that I now know to be true. Like, everything's not a lie, and then obviously everything's not the truth, far from it.
Yeah.
And it's like, it almost throws you for a loop in a way that keeps you interested. How, like, okay, so is this plot true? And if this is true, does that mean this isn't true? Like,
and then what's the reason behind it?
Yeah, all those things. And you know what? I wanted to ask, just like from an organization perspective, like, honestly, how do you keep track of, like, this is what we do know now, this is what we still don't know, this is the source we need for this? Like, you're a journalist, obviously, so obviously that's a big part of the job in general, but how do you, when there's so many moving parts in a story like this, do you have any, like, logistical methods of keeping organized?
Such a good question. Oh my God. I had sleepless nights my brain was, I mean, I was dreaming about it and how to actually do it. And I do again really like what you just said, because there was elements of truth in it, and so I threw those in on purpose. And so, I mean, the way I do it is I get a massive, and I do this with all projects, I get a massive board and stick post-it notes everywhere and try and work out how to reveal. So you'll know, because you've got up to the end of episode 6, but that there's a big reveal that she was diagnosed with cancer, or said she was diagnosed with cancer before she started her blogs, but actually started her blog posts because she was diagnosed with cancer.
Right. Yeah, that was crazy. Yeah, that was crazy.
But what I decided to do was tell you that story, but not tell you the time frame. But it was really complicated to make. And you know, again, guys, sound like I'm like gushing over you both, but I appreciate it, because I think when you really go into the nuts and bolts of it as a creator, it's really hard to create that kind of story. It's really, really hard. So I had post-it notes everywhere. You know, you craft an original outline, and then I moved it all over the place, then moved it again, then did like a first draft of kind of, you know, obviously went and got all these different interviews and sat there with them and was like, oh my gosh, you know, it's a massive puzzle. I think it's a big jigsaw, and you've got to try and, you know, and then you'd get to the end, and then I'd go back over and go, okay, have we revealed this? So I'd have the moments of like where things are revealed, and then it's like, oh no, okay, I need to make sure that's revealed. And then I'd know, because the thing is, it's like you start the story in 1 and 2, but I need to reveal it, say, in 7. So then I make a note that I have to make sure I reveal that, and then I'll go back to tick box basically what I've revealed. But it is just like a big web, spider's web of trying to put everything together, really, and then just move things all the time. And anybody who wants to create out of there, just I would say don't be structured. I know that's the opposite of what people think, but don't be structured, and don't get bogged down in how you think something should be told. Let the story guide. So that's why I love your questions, because I wanted people to not just listen to their story, but experience it. And I hope that's why it's doing so well, because I think people emotionally connect. So if you tell it from afar, maybe you don't emotionally connect. But I think with this, you feel things. Well, I certainly did. I mean, you know, when I was like locking the very last episodes, I knew the story like the back of my hand, like I was dreaming about it. I could recite it. I could, you know, I'd listened and crafted those episodes hundreds of times. And even at the end, I was still going. So then I knew, I was like, okay, this is good, because I'm not tired of the story.
Yeah.
You know, because I live and breathe it for months and months and months and months and months. And it's all I do. And I listen and listen and listen and work it and work it and work it and change things and edit and blah, blah, over and over again.
The whole thing reminds me of the Gypsy Rose Blanchard story, in the sense that it wouldn't be as shocking. And I feel like the message of just how much people can really manipulate somebody with their emotions, and, you know, wanting to believe that people are telling the truth about these things. I think it definitely makes the podcast even more unique, in the sense that, like you mentioned, you're going along that journey, but also it wasn't black and white where it's like, this is immediately a bad person. It's like you really wanted to believe that. And I'm sure in some ways, you know, she there's got to be some reason why people liked her for so long.
And I just can't wait to get to the part where she's like,
I can't wait. I don't know how it ends.
I don't know what she says about all this.
Yeah.
Like,
so we're trying to avoid spoilers. I think a good way to end on this is that we do know 2 things, and that is, it's Scamanda. You know, she wasn't telling the truth about a lot of things, and she really had people fooled, and she's dealing with the legal system now. And we also know, because you mentioned that she you've had contact with her and you've talked to her, and you kind of know what she makes of all this. How is she doing now, and what does she make of all this now that she's been found out? Could you see the way she manipulated people? Like, how did you feel when you were with her? I like that too.
You know, even it just made me think of something you were both talking about, you know, the word scam. Again, I was kind of cautious of that, because if you go, oh, it's about a woman who fake cancer and she did this scam, and you're like, oh, okay. To me, it doesn't really do it justice, because there's a whole family. There's a web that I think we can all relate to. And I also think it's not for me to judge. So as the storyteller, like, obviously I have my own opinion, but I don't believe things are black and white ever. And so I always wonder why people do things. And I don't really believe in like people are evil either. So and again, I'm not saying it's up to everybody else what they think, but I think what makes it so interesting is that there is people's behavior on a lower level that I think sometimes people exaggerate. You know, we all tell little lies to an extent, and anybody says they don't needs to look at themselves in the mirror, because I think I'm a really good person, but you know, we have tendencies to, you know, people want attention. You know, look at celebrity, look at social media now. So there's elements of people's behavior, I think, and I'm not saying that it's not a justification of what she's done, it's just an understanding of people's motivations and psychology. So to answer your questions, I think it was about attention. I don't think it was premeditated. This is just my opinion. She says it wasn't premeditated, but it depends whether you want to believe her or not.
Right.
But in my opinion, I don't think it was. I think it was very clever, but I think she's a very clever person. And again, there's this, you know, I remember doing another project, which was somebody who was a drug trafficker. And I never forget, they said to me, because I was like, my God, they're some of the most cleverest people I've met. And yeah, they've done bad things, but doesn't mean you can't be clever. And he said to me, you know, you can have an evil genius, you can have a criminal genius. And I was like, oh yeah, you can. And so she's clever, like whether you like it or not. So I don't think it was premeditated. I think it was like she started to realize that she could get attention for certain things by saying certain things. And I have found out that, you know, there's a few bonus episodes that I've decided to record and drop because I found out some more things actually after I finished production. So I went back into it because I was like, oh, I can't leave this here. Like, I just can't leave it here. I'm going to have to do some extra bits. Because I did find out there was things beforehand. And then I think it's really interesting, like how somebody slowly starts to do this bit by bit, and then it just grows and grows and grows. And I think if you know, a lot of people are really angry about what she's done, quite rightly. But, you know, also it's just really fascinating how somebody can do this. And she feels there's a lot more to this than the story. And I'm trying not to say too much. And, you know, that she's victimizing herself and feels like Nancy and the ex-wife to Amanda's husband have it in for her. And that's what she pursues. And in a way, I can understand that, because imagine if you'd done something really wrong and hurt a lot of people, and a lot of people were like, you know, there's all sorts of people calling all sorts of things. For you to own up to that, you have to face yourself, right? So it's like typical narcissism. What you do is you victimize yourself and put the blame on other people. But you'll have to get to the end.
I think very few people who do something on that level
are able to.
It's like they're not, like you said, like how could you even?
Well, the type of person who would do it in the first place is also the same type of person who would really not want to accept it when they're called out and caught.
Right. Yeah. And they probably feel that they have it's like people who do things that affect people, they probably feel that they have a reason for it. And not only feel that they have a reason for it, but do have a reason for it. People don't just do, you know,
things out of nowhere.
Yeah.
People believe their own lies sometimes. You know, some people lie so much that they don't even know what the truth is anymore, or their own identity, because their identity is caught up in lies. And again, it's not a justification, it's just interesting, right? And I think when you start to understand the behavior, that's when you can catch people out. When she knew Nancy was looking, you know, basically saying she was faking cancer, and Nancy was like contacting a few people and digging into the story to find out information, it got back to Amanda. And what Amanda did, I am going to spoil it, so turn off if you don't want to know, and then come back on again, of course. But I'm going to spoil just one little thing. was she took Nancy to court for accusing her of faking cancer. So she stood there in court on oath, accusing Nancy of accusing her of faking cancer. And she actually took out a restraining order against her and basically made Nancy go through court for 6 months, because Nancy had to prove that she wasn't, for basically civil harassment. So, and then when the police looked into Amanda, Amanda pushed even harder. So I'll leave you with that, because I think, you know, you could have a field day if you're a psychologist on that.
The way that everything's unfolded is just so brilliantly done, and congratulations on everything, because it sounds like a headache to do but a joy to listen to. Yeah, exactly. And there's definitely a lot to think about. Like, I think that you said too, like, we're psychology minors, right, journalism majors, so it's like, yeah, there's it's not just like it goes beyond just Amanda, right? It's like there are people that are, and like
they're everywhere, really.
Yeah, and like what does it say about them? What does it say about society? There's just so many questions. What does it say about us for wanting to believe it to be true? What does it say about us for being interested? Yeah, like, there's so much to it, right?
I studied like schema, which is like patterns of behavior, and I don't know. I think somebody who was scared and who had a moral compass in a way would stop. But again, maybe it's not about moral compass. Maybe it's about being totally carried away. And then you get to the point where you can't lose face. So you push harder and push harder. Because I think that's what's so interesting. Her house got raided and she didn't turn her off. She just kept on going and pushed harder and harder and turned the heat up. Obsessed with true crime. What's that say about us? But I do think the human behavior is fascinating. I really do. And that's why I wanted to leave it with everyone. That's why I made it detailed, because I think it's important to understand the detail of it and what she actually did and the impact it had on people, rather than just top line in a story. I think the detail is really important, because then you can start to kind of understand the scope, because this was really complex and it was really deep and there was so much to it. So for me to chop it and make it something, I just think wouldn't have done it justice, because the human behavior side of everything is fascinating for me. And I think that's why we love true crime.